Father, we thank you for your kindness to us and really for the privilege we have, as we say. I don't want to take it for granted or have it just be words that we get to come and to learn and to study and to see your word and, again, behind the scenes, some of the things that you put in there for us, to see how you get glory. And so we ask for your guidance and your wisdom as we continue to study the unseen realm. And we just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so just two sheet I gave you, you'll see it on the front and back here. And just I always like to rehearse a couple things. Not rehearse, but just review would be a good word. So this is really important, I think, as we as you digest some of this, or as we digest it, as we interact. The whole idea of some of the verbiage. Some of us were talking this morning, and when we look at the word Elohim, let's do a little review. What is this word? Spiritual. Yeah. If we just say spiritual being, if everybody in the world, or in the scholarly world, or any world, if they adopted this definition, then I think it would eliminate some of the problems that people have in trying to understand what the whole topic is about. Because when we think about, well, let me ask you this question, okay? So think about your Sunday school years, okay? And let's see, when I'm going to skip ahead for a moment. In Exodus 12:12, right there, God goes to war in Egypt. It says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night. I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am Yahweh." So in your Sunday school mentality, I'm not picking on anybody here because I have this too, or your new Christian, what does that mean? I will, on all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment. What do you envision?
I envision a bunch of little demons running around and little gods.
Like you actually envision
spiritual beings.
Even back when you were 12 years old?
I had a really sound back.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. What are the rest of you in the non-sound background? What do you think of?
Ra, the gods that the Egyptians worshiped.
Yeah. Idols, right? We think of the sun disk. For the most part, did any of us think that these were real?
No.
Besides one, okay?
I had a very active imagination.
Oh, that could be that too.
Read The Lord of the Rings.
There you go.
All that stuff. So.
Depends on what you define as real.
Ontologically existing.
Well,
not in their mind, not in their theology.
No, I think that they had there was something that they were connected to, not just a physical object, but something they were connected to, because there's too many of them, and they're too common between all the groups of people in the ancient world. And
it doesn't take long before we're confronted with having to wrestle with, these aren't just idols, stone, because when they throw down, when Moses throws down his rod, it becomes a snake, and they do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Unless, then you gotta go, well, wait a minute, was that real? Did that really happen? Or was that just hyperbole? I remember listening to a message one time by R.C. Sproul, and he said he used that Egyptian magician example as a example of sleight of hand, that it wasn't real. And I was thinking, what? Because he was talking about in his eschatology. He wrote a book called The Last Days According to Jesus, which I do not recommend at all. And but he was talking about the Antichrist in 2 Thessalonians 2, where it describes the Antichrist will come with all power and lying wonders, lying miracles. And so, what is the definition of a lying miracle?
miracle is not true.
An illusion.
Okay?
False.
See, that's good. So, Jerry, will you read that for us? I want to make sure that we're saying this right. It's 2 Thessalonians 2.
2 Thessalonians 2.
Yep. Probably like 4, 5, 6 in there. Just look for that phrase. He will come with all power and
It says he will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worship, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. That's
Keep going.
4. Don't you remember that when I was with you, I used
9.
9.
Skip to 9.
9?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not.
The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance
There you
with
go.
how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of powers through signs and wonders that serve the lie, and in all the ways that wickedness deceives those who are perishing. They perish because they refuse to love the truth, so to
Okay.
be saved.
Mine says false wonders.
Okay, what verse is that?
11.
Well, no, or false signs in 9.
Okay.
Power and false signs.
See, so you have power.
Signs and wonders.
See, I memorized the King James, so lying signs is what mine says, but power, false signs, okay. But what false signs? That's fine. That's good. So the question is, false miracles. Okay.
Something that doesn't point to God and Christ.
That's the question. Are these miracles that really happened, or are they fake miracles?
Really happened,
They
but
can really happen, but they point to a false God.
Well, it says it's wonders that serve the lie, according to mine.
To serve the lie, and it says according to how Satan works. How does Satan work?
To deceive.
Deceive. That's the main thing, is deceive. Okay, we see that in Revelation. So these are real miracles that deceive. That's why they're called false or lying or whatever the other language version you have. These are real things that are meant to deceive, and so we see that even in Revelation 13 with the lawless one there, where the false prophet comes and he calls down fire from heaven, which is lightning, right? At when he wants, supposedly the Antichrist gets raised from the dead, he receives a mortal wound, and all of a sudden he's alive again. So we have this idea here of these real supernatural, right, beyond human situations that are meant to deceive. And so, when I heard him say that, I thought, wow, he is scroll here. He is interpreting, because 2 Thessalonians 2 in his grid of Revelation 13 being symbolic, because he believes that all of Matthew 24 and most of the book of Revelation was fulfilled in 70 AD. So there's no real future in his thinking. He's very much a preterist in his view. But when we think about this verse here in Exodus 12, and on all the Elohim of Egypt, I will execute my judgments. I am Yahweh. You start going, okay, good job, God. You're so amazing that you judged an idol, you judged a stone. Wow, woohoo, yeah, you really showed your power there. In reality, if we deny that this is a real being, when God says later, I'm going to get glory over Pharaoh and all the gods of Egypt, you go, I can go push the idol down too. So does that give me glory?
What comes to mind is what the Pharisees weren't that far off then when they said, when Jesus do a miracle, you're doing it by your prince of Beelzebub. So they did realize that, evidently.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And you see this I'll say this in the big scheme, that if you look at what we call Second Temple period Judaism, Jesus' day right there, and especially with the Dead Sea Scrolls being discovered, you go back 100 years, And we really didn't understand as much of the first century milieu. What's that word, milieu?
Maybe.
The historical context. So you have that word and we go, oh yeah, because for us, the Jews, we looked at the Jews through the lens of rabbinic thinking, rabbinic theology, the Talmud. And there is some of that, but the rabbinic thinking only takes into consideration the Pharisees. And so the Pharisees weren't the only group. Now that we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, we understand that it was extremely diverse. And so when you look at the Second Temple period Judaistic background, you go, oh wow. I mean, you have the Essenes that are camping out in the desert. You have, certainly we see in the New Testament the Sadducees, we see the Herodians, you see the Zealots, you see all these other groups. But we don't necessarily have any writings from them. All we have is the rabbinic writings. And so we tend to look and go, oh, Judaism was this. Well, then when the Dead Sea Scrolls came, it just blew that all out. And we're like, whoa, it's really? And so in that context, what you're describing is you do see this, like the Elohim context. You don't see this, I'll be honest. You don't see this in rabbinic Judaism. That's where a lot of that has influenced New Testament thinking or New Testament interpretation or even Old Testament interpretation, because when you go to some of the, when we did a little bit there, we'll get more when we get to Psalm 82. But this word Elohim, I'm going to be dogmatic that this is what this means. I won't even bend, honestly, and I'll give you my reasons, but typically, spiritual being or human judges. So, this is, if you go to again, MacArthur, or many of your modern Christian, even Old Testament people, even in your Jewish thinking, when the word Elohim appears, they say, well, you have some choices to make based on context, which that's how you define words. It could be spiritual being. It could be what we did is before, way back in the beginning, we also said that it certainly can refer to idols, like stone. Okay, I have no problem with that one. Because the stone idol is still in reference to what? A spiritual being. So you have this option, which kind of connects with this one. But this is the one, you'll say, oh, well, it depends on the context. It could be a human judge. Well, a human judge is not a spiritual being. A human judge is a physical human being. And once this gets in there, it creates all sorts of confusion. And that's why a lot of what we're examining in the unseen realm has been lost in its interpretation or understanding, because people say, no. When in Psalm 82, when God stands in the midst of the Elohim, in the congregation of God, in the midst of the Elohim, he judges. They go, oh, well, it's in the midst of the human judges that he's judging.
What about pagan deities?
Correct. Those two, which they're still, you're talking about the idols, or are you talking about the real pagan deities?
Spiritual.
Yeah. Are there real other spiritual beings that have defected? Mm-hmm. Yes. See, that's what we're going through here. This is super important. And when we get to some of these other ones, I mean, I've established a little bit here, but I haven't wanted to bore you guys going through every last phrase of all these things. But in reality, this is, if we throw that in there, it's gonna be lost, and that's super important. So that if we do understand it to only mean spiritual being, then when we get here, and we talk right at the top, God distanced himself from the nations, and he assigned the nations to various spiritual beings, and assigned spiritual beings to the various nations. We go, okay, and we discussed that last couple times. It's highly unlikely that God would assign already defected spiritual beings to administer the nations. When we get to Psalm 82, there I'm reading number 1, we'll see that God, as he assigned them, even Psalm 58. Jerry, will you read Psalm 58, verse 1? That'll be helpful. As God assigned these spiritual beings to the nations to oversee them, is it possible that God assigned these nations to already rebelled spiritual beings? Maybe. I don't think so. I think they started off good.
Well, okay, so that would imply that there was more than one rebellion then.
Correct. Yep.
And where is that?
Well,
I mean, not to introduce it right now, but just as an idea, what would that?
we talked about it the last couple times in the sense that one of the things that we see, that we deduce, it's a deduction, is that, and I think it's pretty solid because, for example, we went through, I don't know if you were here when we went through, I spent 40 minutes going through Revelation 12, where it says that Satan grabbed a third of the stars. And we were looking at the sequential, chronological background to that, to where clearly that was not prior to the world being created. It can't be. If it is, then our hermeneutics, our way that we interpret the Bible is inconsistent, and it's illogical, and we're just playing games, and we're just choosing what we want. So based on that fact, what we do know is, all we know is what? That Satan was a rebel. That's all we can prove, is that prior to Genesis 3, Satan was a rebel. That's provable.
You know where my mind goes when you say that, you know, and again, I've never really thought of this before, so, but what comes to mind is when the scriptures say that Satan was cast down to earth, assigned. Is that a possibility? And so for me, just hearing you say, you know, and through the New Testament, different things, it says he gave them over to whatever they want. We just saw that Thessalonians we'd read further. And so, I don't know, I see that possibly he could have assigned them to evil rulerships, unless you, but.
Yeah, you know what, it's, it could be that, as we talked about the wrath of his abandonment, he abandons us. That's why I used the word distance himself. When God distances himself or abandons us, we saw that, 2 Thessalonians 2, Romans 1. We saw that certainly in Deuteronomy 32, which is where we went through that. And we went through the several other verses that talk about how God just says, I'm going to give you over to yourself. Now, it could be, that's why I said, it could be that God said, you know what, you nations, I'm going to give you over to these already defected angelic beings. The reason why I don't follow that necessarily is we haven't got there yet, is Psalm 82. Because in Psalm 82, God says, hey, why aren't you guys doing what you were supposed to do, which is lead these people into justice, into righteousness, into administering mercy. So I think I don't think he would hold Satan accountable for that, in the sense that, yeah, Satan's fallen. He's not going to go, hey, why didn't you do this? He goes, well, what do you mean? I've been rebelled before you even created mankind. Why is this nothing new here? But where Psalm 82 seems to suggest that they were once good and then they had defected, and then God now says, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. Read Psalm 58, verse 1 and 2.
Do you rulers indeed speak justly? Do you judge people with equity?
See,
That's
I hate English, okay?
You hate English? Now that's John MacArthur. I'm in John MacArthur.
Well, what version do you have?
NIV.
Okay, I'll read the ESV. Who's got the ESV? Go ahead, read that.
Do you indeed decree what is right, you gods? Do you judge the children of man uprightly?
Okay, you see that?
Yes.
See, NIV, I don't blame MacArthur for that one, because he's not responsible. But here, the ESV is one of the latest versions of the Bible. I strongly suggest the ESV, because the ESV takes all of the literature that now we're discussing, and the scholars that had translated the ESV, they're like, hey, they're taking a little bit more of a literal, they're letting you decide. Instead of using the word ruler, it says, okay, do you indeed decree what is right, you, and then in the note, yeah, you look at Elohim, you gods. So what they're doing is what the NIV did is said, oh, Elohim, well, we need to help you out. Okay? So we're going to say rulers. Which, okay, I'm not even opposed to a spiritual being a ruler, because we know, is Michael, the archangel? By definition, he's a ruler. He oversees Israel. We saw that in Daniel 10. So, but when you think of ruler, when you're reading that,
Takes on a human context.
takes a human context. So, and this is really important too, because in Psalm 58, this language just, boom, it brings me right to Daniel 4. What happened in Daniel 4? Remember with Nebuchadnezzar, he pride, right? I'm exalting himself. What do we remember? I know it's hard. What do we remember from Daniel 4? What happened there? What was the response?
Humbled him and made him go crawl around like an animal.
Yes, but you're leaving out the middle part. This was the decree of the what?
The Watchers.
Of the Watchers. See, now it's true, there's no doubt. I said, you're right. But there it says, this was a decree of the Watchers.
Were the Watchers good then at that point?
Yes, these
They
were
were
good
following
Watchers.
the dictates of what they should do.
Yep.
So they saw justice and saying, okay, 7 years, grow your fingernails,
Boom.
you're out of here.
And so there's no doubt later they say this was also a decree of Yahweh. So Yahweh, remember, Yahweh invites them to participate in his decrees. He allows them to make a decree and he says, I like this decree, let's do it. So God had invited the Watchers to participate in his adjudication of a pagan king. So this, two things that connect here is you have a decree, that's Psalm 58, and you have this over here. You have two connections now. You have an Elohim, or a watcher, and you have a decree happening. And Psalm 58 says, why? I won't, sorry, Jerry, I won't have you read it. Do you indeed decree what is right, you Elohim? Do you judge the children of man? See, why would they say that? What's the contrast there? Do you read, read verse 1 again in the NIV. Now listen to what this is saying.
NIV. Well, that's what I just said, right?
Yeah, do it again for me.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you rulers indeed speak justly? Do you judge people with equity?
So what you have now, according to that version, is you have a human-to-human rulership, right? The ESV, which is a little bit more literal, says, do you, Elohim, judge the children of men? You see that?
Yeah.
There's a contrast of being there. There's a watcher coming down to these humans, and it's a little bit more literal, the sons of men. Whenever you have the sons of men, it's talking about humanity. So here now you have a contrast between humanity and this other Elohim spiritual being. It's pretty fascinating, but if you were just to read the NIV, you'd go through and, oh, God is holding accountable these human rulers that are ruling other human rulers. And that's not the contrast there at all.
Well, my MacArthur's
Notes?
charges, it says it was charges against the wicked leaders and judges.
MacArthur gets a failing grade, okay, on that passage.
And you told me you liked it.
I do. Like I gave him a 90% overall. That's an A, right? But see here, he's not an Old Testament guy, so he's not living in the Old Testament milieu. Okay, so he's like, this is a human judge and a human judge, but the language isn't saying that, Bill.
Well, the Watchers, because I remember that particular lesson. However, so over Babylon you have Watchers that are decreeing this event to Nebuchadnezzar. But in Daniel's time you have the Prince of Persia who was keeping the angel coming to Daniel to answer his prayer, which implies there's not a group, there's a single. Is that,
Well,
would that not follow?
that's what we're going to discuss today. It brings up a great question because it's really hard to answer sometimes with precision because you do have the Prince of Persia, you have the Prince of Greece. That would seem to imply that you have one overseer, right? And I would say that in general that would be true because in Daniel or in Deuteronomy 32 we saw that the nations at the time were divided up according to the number of the sons of God, which were in this very specific, the sons of God were the Watchers. That's the same image. So I had this idea that, the 70 nations were given over to 70 Watchers. Okay? So that would be a singular. So the question here, though, is God says, on all the Elohim of Egypt, I'm going to execute judgment. So the question, I was going to bring that up. I have no problem thinking that there is one main Elohim over each nation, but he has his other subordinates, other Elohim that are, and we'll see this in a minute, that are part of his entourage or his kingdom or his management, if you wanted to say it. So that when God says, hey, I'm going to judge the Elohim of Egypt, it wasn't just the main guy, the Elohim over Egypt, it was him and all of his other
The
hierarchy. You follow? So that's, I can only prove that deductively through like verses like this to go, well, you know, we're talking about, because how do we reconcile Daniel 10, which seems to imply a singular prince of Persia, and then we have verses like this, or we have, as you mentioned in Daniel 4, in Babylon, the watchers, plural, giving a decree over Nebuchadnezzar. So we're trying to fit this all together as best as we can.
I'm just a little bit confused in that. Is it because the Watchers could take on human form that you say human to human?
No, I'm not saying human to human.
Okay.
Psalm 58 in the NIV is implying human to human.
Okay, because okay, that's fine.
Yep. Because they chose to translate Elohim as ruler there. Clearly they think, the translators think it's a human. Right? Because they're under the impression that, remember, Elohim can be a human judge, which is also a ruler. That's in their mind. As they're translating this, they believe this is one of the possibilities. I do not at all. So when they're translating it, they're thinking, oh, well, let's just put a ruler, because the ruler is decreeing other children of men. Humans. Oh, well, that makes perfect sense. We got a ruler with a ruler, and you rulers, you human rulers, aren't doing your job adjudicating, decreeing over other human rulers. Do you see how that's a subtle...
It's a Psalm 82 thing.
It is a Psalm 82 thing, but this is Psalm 58. When we get to read Psalm 82.
Okay.
That's right.
But it's in the NIV.
I know, I want the NIV. And you have ESV, Linda, right? Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I do have ESV too.
No. You do the nearly inspired version, NIV.
Nearly inspired. Oh boy, you led me down the path to.
No, I actually like the NIV most of the time. I
That's
think
what
the
you told me
NIV
before.
does a great job.
82,
Here,
right? You said
blows it.
that's
Okay,
right.
go ahead.
82.
No, yeah, Psalm 82, just verse 1 is fine.
God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods.
Okay, that's actually not... Okay, read... Okay, Psalm... Oh. Read the NIV again, just so everybody hears it.
God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods.
Okay,
And little g on gods.
of course. So in Hebrew, this is the word adat-el, okay? El, we know what El is, right? Okay. They translate adat-el. Adat, if you go to like a Messianic congregation, a lot of times it'll be like adat shalom, which is the congregation of peace, or adat Yeshua, or the adat Mashiach, the congregation of the Messiah. They use this word in modern, okay? So adat means assembly. El, they translate it as great, which this can, at some instances, be translated as mighty, like El Gibor, right? The mighty God, well, that's the different one, but El can be something that is extravagant, okay? But they translate it as great assembly, and you go, okay, great assembly? What's ESV?
Divine counsel.
See, it says divine counsel.
Yeah, I like that.
Read it for us.
God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, small g, he holds judgment.
Okay, see how that's way different?
That's way different.
So you're going to read NIV, and it does okay there, because it does talk about God, but it talks about a great assembly, and you go, oh, well, but you wouldn't. See, the ESV now understands all of this research and says, this is a divine council. A divine council of Elohim, spiritual beings, because it says Elohim stands in the Adat El, in the congregation of God. In the midst of the Elohim, he judges.
And that's where MacArthur's wrong again, because it says the psalmist pictures God standing in the assembly of earthly leaders
Yeah.
to whom he has delegated authority and condemning their injustices.
Bah humbug.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I see is great assembly is more like general. It's a general description, whereas
Yeah.
divine council draws it
Yeah,
into very
it does.
specific.
Yes. So let's use my dogmatic language, okay? A spiritual being stands in the congregation of a spiritual being. This is singular. In the midst of the spiritual beings, he judges. Now, we're not even being interpretive here. Let's just use the term spiritual being. So we go, well, who is the spiritual being that's going to be judging other spiritual beings?
Yahweh.
That's pretty easy, right? Yahweh. Because later, what's verse 8? We'll read verse 8 in both of them. This is just fun as I'm allowing the digression, because we're going to get there later. But if you read verse 8, actually read 6 through 8 in the NIV, and then we'll read 6 through 8 here, just for fun. And I want you guys to see the flavor. Okay, go ahead, Jerry. NIV 82:6.
I'm sorry, I'm in ESV now.
What'd you do that for?
You just chastised me too much. I'm seeing what the ESV commentary says now.
I do want to see that later, but
So,
you have NIV again? Well, let's read ESV first. While you get there.
I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations.
Okay.
okay, the ESV commentary says that you could have both of these classifications have merit. In other words, unjust human rulers and God. So
Have merit.
yeah. So they're playing both games there
They're
in
playing
the
both
commentary.
sides.
So
My goal is to forever kill that. I told Bill I'm working on an article. I'm writing an article on this exact thing. And you know, I don't really want to be, but I would love to have one article published in my life. Okay.
I'm back to NIV if you want
But
to read it.
I'm working on this because I want to address every single one of these instances of where human judges is addressed. And I want to put the nail in the coffin on it to say no, so that this is forever removed from all the lexicons as a possibility. Because if it is, then it doesn't have any merit, you know, in that regard. And I think that it can be proven. So, NIV?
In 82?
Yeah. Verse 6 through 8.
6 through 8. Okay. I said, you are God, Son of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die, and shall fall like a prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations.
Okay, so all I'm going to say here is that if we interpret that God, verse 1, that Elohim, Yahweh, is standing in the congregation of God, his assembly, his divine council. What was the divine council given responsibility for in Deuteronomy 32? The nations. Okay. God is standing there and he says to them, I'm going to bring judgment on you. These aren't good angels, right? Good angels don't need to be judged. He's not judging Michael. Okay. He's judging these ones that have somehow defected. And then he goes through and he goes, didn't I say that you were all Elohim, all sons of the Most High, all of you? And yet, you, because of your defection, you are going to die
Like humans.
like men. So, Jerry, just so you know, you're going to be judged so harshly that you're going to die like a man.
Oh, wow, that's terrible.
So that would kind of feed into the idea, the concept of us as believers judging angels.
Yes. Yep, 1 Corinthians 6:3. But how intimidating is it for you, Dr. Will, to die like a man? You're going to go, oh, well, I guess I'm going to die
I'd
like
be
a man.
surprised if I didn't.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if I didn't.
Surprised if I didn't.
Do you see the verbiage there that's making a contrast between these Elohim dying like a man? That's a big deal now. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I'm sure it means that they're not going to die whimping like some little woman or a little child.
right? Dying like a man, taking it on the battlefield. Isn't that what they're talking about? Like, dying
bravery?
Dying bravely, yeah, exactly, bravely, yeah, that's my premise.
No, they
I'm
are.
going on a book tour later.
Clinton, rescue us here, help us.
But he's talking about.
That's our notion of dying, that's our social construct of
Correct.
dying like a man, not God's construct.
Right, especially because he makes a big deal. Did I not say that you were all Elohim?
Yeah.
Sons of the Most High?
So now he's condemning them to an actual death, whereas before they were immortal.
Correct.
Nice.
So now he's going, guess what,
It
guys?
doesn't seem that difficult,
You
does
can't
it?
back up here and you can't change the choice that you made, and now
Yep.
you will die like all sinners and be cast into hell.
Which, that's the big deal there, is that you had these Elohim which were immortal,
Yeah.
and now God says, you're
Not
going to
anymore.
experience something you weren't designed to do, which they were, the judgment of humanity is very clearly a human thing. Death, angels don't die. That's again, that's biblical, but God says, no, for you, you're going to experience the same death that's similar to what humanity does, and then we'll get, again, we're way ahead off topic here, but this is helpful for us because when we get to, okay, we got time, we're gonna finish this, all right? But go ahead.
Just to throw a little angst in this, the commentary says here, if
Which
you go to
commentary?
John 10:34, Jesus, in quoting this verse, said 10:30 supported the intimate interpretation that gods were human beings.
I could not disagree more in my entire life.
What is it? John 10:34. What is it?
No, we're not going. I'm going to go there eventually because that's one of the things in this paper. I'm going to establish the word Elohim. It's in Psalm 82, and then how it affects John 10. And so when you get there in a little while, you'll get the sneak peek of where I'm going. Okay? Comment?
Yeah, the Elohim at the Great Assembly, would they be equivalent to a deity? A lesser deity than God, but...
See, now when you start using deity, you're gonna put people off.
Okay.
Because that's English. When you say deity, I agree with you, and I can run with you there. But when you say deity, what do you mean? You mean like Yahweh?
No, lesser God.
So now,
little g.
Are you a polytheist? Do you believe in multiple gods now?
No.
See, I agree. So what happens is, that's why way back when I said, okay, everybody just calm down. Don't kill anybody, don't throw rocks, don't throw stones. We're going to talk about these divinities. We're going to talk about these other deities, these lesser deities. We don't believe in multiple gods. We know there's only one Yahweh. But that's why I prefer not to, it's a buzzword. It gets people's hair wrinkled up. And so I say, do we believe in other spiritual beings? Lesser spiritual beings than the main big spiritual being, Yahweh? Everybody's going to go, well, yeah.
Yeah.
And they just can't get past it. To this day, I talk to people, they cannot get past it.
So say again, the people in Jesus' day, those Jews had the perception that, what was their interpretation?
Okay, this human judge's view came 1st century, 2nd century AD. Okay? And I can prove that. Okay?
And before that, the
Before
Jews
that,
didn't believe.
they believed in the divine council idea. That's why Michael Heiser, in his dissertation, his whole dissertation was about the divine council. That's what he did. But what he said, well, let's examine all the Qumran literature, the Dead Sea Scroll literature, and see what they believed. They clearly held to a divine council idea. And it wasn't until afterwards, and I think it can be proven, that when the rabbis took over the mantle of carrying the theology of Judaism, remember, this is post 70 AD now. All of your, in our view, you have the liberals and the conservatives, okay? So let me just give you another example, a modern day illustration. Okay, today in the Christian world, you have every stripe, right? You have the complete progressive liberals, theologically, that are all over the map. All the different, the modern denominations that have really gone off the deep end, right? They don't believe in inspiration. And you go from them all the way over to, let's say, the evangelical conservatives, okay? Now, I'm not putting, just work with me, okay? Let's say the rapture happens and the conservative evangelicals are gone.
Okay.
Who now or what is the face of Christianity? The ones left.
Apostasy.
Okay? The ones that didn't believe it anyway. So at 70 AD, you had an equivalent idea in that all of your competition was wiped out, and the only group that survived that were the rabbis. The Pharisees turning into the rabbis. Additionally, what the rabbis had to deal with, what did the rabbis have to deal with post 70 AD?
No temple.
No temple?
Sacrificial.
No sacrifices? What other competing environment did exist post 70 AD?
Christian.
Roman pantheon.
Jewish Christians. No, Jewish Christians. I mean, that's true, the Romans, but we'll get rid of them for a moment. They're pagans. You have the Jewish Christians, and now you have the Jewish rabbis. And you see this fight going on between them. Those were the winners that came out, because Christianity, as we know, was still very Jewish, and there was a lot of Jewish Christians there, and they were fighting theologically. Well, then the rabbis, you see them shift in their thinking, because this idea of the divine council, and at that time you have this very well-known idea of the two powers. That's a whole other topic. The Second Temple period people believed in the two powers, which were, it's kind of like not a trinity, but a binity, okay? Two. Why? Because in Old Testament theology, they clearly understood that you had Yahweh, but what else did you have that was hard to distinguish?
Spirit.
No? You remember this? In Genesis 22, well, I'll give you in Judges.
The law.
No? In Judges, the angel of the Lord comes and says, I brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Angel.
The angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord in Genesis 20, remember, okay, there's Genesis 22, there's all these verses, Exodus 3, where it says, God spoke to Moses out of the burning bush, and then it says, and the angel of Yahweh spoke to Moses out of the burning bush. And then in Genesis 22, when he's offering Isaac, he says, the angel of the Lord said, do not withhold your son. He goes, I will bless you. I will give you this land. You go, what? Angel, where's this guy coming from? You have this, if you study the angel of the Lord versus Yahweh, you can put them as taking on the same exact authority. And so you had these two powers idea. Well, that fits well with, of course, our understanding of the Trinity. But for the Jews, for the rabbis, they distanced themselves from that Second Temple period idea, and they went to absolute monotheism, which got rid of all of this spiritual being, extra Elohim. Why? Because they had the hair cackled up, and they got rid of much of the Elohim language.
Well, they could also probably think back about their, Jerusalem being taken in captivity and saying, well, see, this is punishment, this destruction
Yes.
is punishment because we were going towards idols.
Yep.
Instead of worshiping the one God.
Yep. And we believe in one God. But for them, they removed some of the language to even hint. And so when you read in the 1st century, 2nd century AD, you had something called, if you've ever heard of a Targum, plural is Targumim. A Targum is a Aramaic translation of the Hebrew it's a Hebrew Old Testament being translated into Aramaic, because much of the rabbis in their language in the Talmud, it was all Aramaic, okay, a little bit of Hebrew. When they translated it into Aramaic, in Exodus 21 and Exodus 22 and these other places, they actually changed, and Hebrew and Aramaic are sister languages. They changed the Elohim to, there's different versions of it, to the Dinaim, which is the Hebrew word or Aramaic word for judges. So here, in order to avoid the Elohim language, the possibility of multiple other gods, they changed the word and they said, oh, judges. And then through that has stuck in all of the rest of the Talmudic writings. So then when, I find it interesting that in my research, when you go to the 4th century, Jerome, translating the Vulgate into Latin, translating the Hebrew to Latin, he we know like coram deo, right? That's a Latin phrase. What does it mean? R.C. Sproul. I like R.C. Sproul. He used to say this all the time. Coram deo means like in the face of God's, right? So we have this is the Latin here. Well, we know this, right? De, just as the word for God, okay? Well, in the Latin Vulgate, he translates very literally the word deus, which just is a conjugation, that this is before God. He doesn't take this word judge, but when you come later, the first person in English was Wycliffe in the 1300s. He translated Elohim to judges. That's the first time it appears in English, and once something gets into English, try getting it out. And so, anyways, I'm going to try to highlight all this later, and I mentioned it before, but anyways, so this is where some of this comes, and you can't root it out. So what we're trying to do is to get rid of some of this incrustation by these rabbis who had their own theology, trying to disrupt Christianity and the idea of a Trinity and everything else, and you see this in some of the writings. But
isn't angel of the Lord, meaning the pre-incarnate Christ?
That's what we say,
right?
And I have no problem with that. I think that's true. I think that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's reading New Testament theology back into the Old, so we want to let it stand on its own first. But we could say, yeah, that's probably Jesus. Can we prove that 100%? I think the only way that we probably could prove it would be John 8:58, where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees or the Jews, and he says, Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it. And they're like, well, how did he see you? You're not even 50. Well, if we go for the angel of the Lord showing up in Genesis 18.
And that was worded Elohim of the Lord?
No, it just says the Lord there.
Yeah.
That's the only place that I could...
Where in John?
Genesis 18.
Oh, no.
The Lord appeared with two angels, and then they right before Sodom and Gomorrah and all that. Okay. So, that's kind of a nice intro. All right? So this will go kind of fast because I don't want to... I'm certainly not going to go through all this. I'm trying to just highlight this for you guys. Okay. Number 2 there. Some or all of the patriarch angels became corrupt and sought to encourage wickedness, idolatry, antagonism against Yahweh the Creator amongst the nations that they were assigned.
I have a question on that. Just because of going back to the Daniel part when it says the watchers
decreed
something. So is it possible that it's like a cabinet of watchers per area and some defected and some held true?
I would think that that's yes. Okay. That what you have is God, according to Deuteronomy 32, it says that it says he divided up the nations according to the number of the sons of God, and you have 70 nations appearing in Genesis 10. So the idea there would be that he assigned them one each. Okay, Prince of Persia, right, in Daniel. But I tend to think that once, again, can I prove this? No, and I'll admit it. That God still has good angels, Michael, seeking to promote righteousness and goodness in every nation. When those defected, he's like, hey, cabinet, my cabinet, my divine council, come here. Well, they defected, so now, can I trust one of you guys to oversee Greece in a positive way that won't defect on me? Calling him in, and I would say yes. I would think that there is that idea, because what we do know is it says Michael was one of the chief princes. He wasn't the only one. There were many chief princes. So just because you have a prince of Greece doesn't mean there's no other princes. I don't think so. I think that there's others there based on some other, trying to bring it all together deductively.
Wasn't the watchers, though, they were supposed to be good all around from Enoch and Jubilee, that they were supposed to teach the humans the way God, kind of can work, let's say, the sciences and things like that?
Well, God, I don't know.
No? Okay.
That's possible, but what we know for sure from the book of Enoch is that they taught humans astronomy and astrology, all these things that were forbidden. So could we say that there were positive angels that were supposed to be teaching those in a positive way? We don't have that at all. There's no documentation on that. All we know is what the ones that got held accountable, they were evil, and they taught these forbidden arts, these forbidden things like war and other things, where God says, that's not for you to teach them that. If they want to discover it on their own, let them. But the angels took it upon themselves, these fallen evil watchers, to teach these forbidden things, and they were held accountable for it. That's what I would say. Because in Psalm 58, if we read it, why aren't you decreeing? Do you indeed decree what is right, you Elohim? So there are decrees, like the watchers decreed judgment on Nebuchadnezzar. And I would say in the same way, Psalm 58, God's saying, hey, if you're going to make decrees, you Elohim, you spiritual beings, are you going to decree righteousness? And so we see that they were a force for righteousness in humanity, or they were supposed to be encouraging righteousness. And that's why, as we see, this is what I would say. Apart from that verse, Psalm 58, that would imply that one of the responsibilities of the watchers, or the Elohim, was to decree righteous things. Okay? That's the only verse I can think of where what we can prove that the Elohim were involved in instruction to humanity. We do have several things where fallen watchers are giving instruction in bad things. We have, for First Enoch, we have in 1 Timothy chapter 4, the doctrines of demons. These demons were going around teaching. And so they're remember, the demons are lesser than the watchers. They're the sons, they're the children, the Nephilim that became. So teaching has been involved. And I would say I have no problem with the implication. It's just hard to be real precise on it. All right? So, number 3 there, much of the rest of Old Testament history is the war between Yahweh and the unknown new Elohim who sought to corrupt his special treasure, Israel. So what I did there is I put Deuteronomy 32, where Moses he's getting ready. Remember, he dies in chapter 33. He's preparing for his death. In 34, he dies. So this is like his last words to Israel as they're ready to go into the land. He's talking about their history. They made him jealous with other foreign Elohim. They enraged him with abhorrent idols. They sacrificed to demons, not God, to gods they had not known, to new gods who had recently come along, gods your ancestors had not known about. So in 17, this is the net version, and all the ESV, all the rest of them, they don't know what to do with this word shadim. Okay, that's why the word shadim in Hebrew. So they just put demons. And the reason why they use the word demons is because this is in the Septuagint version, the Greek version of the Old Testament, they use the word demon. This is also quoted in 1 Corinthians 10, which uses the word daimonion, which is demon, Greek. But the Hebrews say shadim, and I don't. Scholars will say that, and I agree that demon, to me, a demon is a lesser Elohim, which is the Nephilim spirit still living. Okay, half angel, half human. So a demon is very low on the hierarchy to me. When they translate it here in English, demon, it creates a lot of confusion. Okay, because now it says they sacrifice to these lesser. In Hebrew, that is not what it's saying. See, in my mind, language means things, and what I mean is demon automatically, they're sacrificing to these lesser beings. It misleads, I think. The word is shadim, and what we had is, when we were going through shadim is a territorial spirit. Well, what's a territorial spirit? A prince of Greece. A territorial spirit is a watcher. So, but here the word is shadim. It's not the word watcher. Watcher is an Aramaic term. But here they sacrificed to these. I think that these are big dogs still. These aren't lesser. So they sacrificed to these shadim, not to Elohim or Yahweh, but to gods they had not known, right? To new gods that their ancestors. Remember what we said is when God created Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he said, I'm the only Elohim for you. You're not allowed to even talk to any of these other neighboring Elohim. We saw that last time geographically. So Moses is describing how they went and started sacrificing to these new gods that they had not known, right? It says that they recently come along. You go, well, they've always been there, but God had protected Israel. And then the rest of Old Testament history is, are you going to stay faithful to me? Are you going to worship these surrounding gods, these surrounding spiritual beings, which you did not know? They weren't part of your existence. They weren't assigned to you. Remember we talked about the allotment language. You didn't inherit those. I didn't assign those. I assigned myself to you as a special treasure. You guys are very fortunate. So here in Deuteronomy, Moses is reminding them, don't fall into the same trap of worshiping these other Elohim that are the surrounding nations. So,
but it says that we're not gods. So it seems like it's contradictory than what we're saying, because you say, you know, they are gods, but they're saying demons are not gods. So I'm saying,
what version are you reading?
well, now I'm on ESV because I get this chastisement.
I like to read the NIV.
That's flailing that he got.
So read ESV, just the first. They sacrificed to.
It says they sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods they had never known.
So here, the ESV, man, Jerry, you're just picking up the wrong time, is making an interpretation here. Because what does the net say? The reason I put the net here is the net says they sacrificed to demons, not God. Like the one true God. Yours, their interpretation was
gods.
They were no Elohim. See, all we have is this.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay?
That's okay.
What is Elohim?
I'm fine.
What can Elohim refer to? Yahweh?
Yes.
The one true capital G? Right? Or it can refer to plural. So the ESV, they decided to translate it this way. Who were not Elohim, which seems contradictory to me. Well, of course they're Elohim. They're spiritual beings. The net says, well, contextually what this is saying is they sacrificed to Elohim, but not the Yahweh to Elohim. You see that? So you just happen to pick it up the wrong time.
How do we know that you got the right interpretation?
You don't. I'm just reading the net
I can
version.
say, you pick the version you like to get good.
I'm a messenger, man.
Tell them about the net literally putting the words in though, because it's a literal translation, right?
What is the net?
The net is my favorite version of all, because they'll tell you in the notes, hey, the reason why we said God here and not gods like the ESV is because of contextually blah, 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 blah. But there's no doubt that you can choose any one you want and you could be technically right. It's an interpretive issue. So how do I know I'm right? I don't.
I'm up to 5 versions I've downloaded because of your recommendation. I'm into the 6th version. NIV stands for what? N stands for the net is what?
Not nearly the inspired version. The New International version.
New International.
But don't download the net unless you can get the notes. It's worthless without the
Those
notes.
are big notes.
Yeah, they have like 65,000 notes. It's awesome.
It's not the New International version.
I'd be surprised if you'd get it. No, it's NET. Bill?
The way that they did that along in the notes, not in the actual wording of the.
Well, you have, okay, if we read it like in Hebrew, it would just say, they sacrificed to Shadim, not Elohim, to Elohim they had not known, to new Elohim, which had recently come along. Elohim, so when they say not here, they have not God, they're saying this is clearly in reference to Yahweh, because you can't just say, well, they sacrificed to demons, they weren't Elohim, but to Elohim, it would be contradictory to translate it the way the ESV does. They were Elohim. See, we say, oh, they weren't gods, and we jump on that and go, oh, that makes them they weren't real. That's not what it's saying. In one breath, they're saying they sacrificed to demons, to Elohim, but they weren't Elohim.
But New English translation, that's what that is, right?
Correct.
There's no study Bible on that.
Yeah, you might not find it. It can be challenging.
I think you have to change the name here, Unseen Realm, Section 20, Jerry's Bold Surrection. Insurrection.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
He
So
says he likes it.
I do. It's my favorite.
See, he
It
likes
is my
it. That's
favorite.
why I do it. I get it rolling.
It's not my favorite because I agree with it every time. it's my favorite because it explains why they made the choice. Most study Bibles translators, they don't do that. They just give you the translation like the NIV and they don't defend themselves. I want to know, okay, you guys are smarter than me, I grant that. So tell me why you made that translation choice or interpretive choice to say it this way. And they say, well, the reason why, and then oftentimes they'll say, if you want to know why, read this article. And they'll give you an article to go find and read. I like that. So then I'll go chase down the article and go, oh, I see what they're doing here. I'll see why they're making this interpretive choice.
Yeah, and the other thing about the net is, if each Hebrew word were translated into an English word as close as possible, it would be unreadable.
Because it'd be too literal.
Yeah, if you go too literal, it'd be unreadable in the English language. We don't have an exact word for every one of their words because their words have so much different nuances.
Yes.
There's so much different flavor.
They do the same with the Greek.
Yeah, so it's a real challenge to take it to English and make it readable, and I think Net does a good job of showing you literally what it would be unreadably, translated. Then they use their best, use of the English language to make it make sense.
Yeah. To make it, they're giving you a. That's why I like the NIV. The NIV. When we were in school and we were translating things, and I was a very anti-NIV person, right? I just was.
You told me what time you liked.
Right. So then when we would do our translations, I would bring out the professor would say, okay, look, when you translate this, I want you to translate it in meaning. I want to come out. I don't need your word for word literal, because if I do that, I'll get Young's literal translation. Okay. I want you to translate what it's saying, what it means. So when I would get done, I would compare it, and it was almost identical to the NIV. I was like, okay, so it changed my mind because I thought, wow, the NIV really does do a good job here of presenting the flavor of what it actually means and it's communicating. Okay, where the New American Standard is great if you want a hyper literal. Sometimes it's kind of we use the word wooden in the sense that you're like, what is it saying here? But if I didn't have any Greek or Hebrew tools, I would want a copy of the NASB. Because then the NASB is so literal that I could then say, oh, I know what Greek words behind that, or I know what Hebrew words behind that. Because it's so, then I could actually make some translations from the NASB into something that's more understandable. That's why the NASB, I like it for that reason. But in the sense of here, the net does the best. Okay? So all that being said, because this class ultimately is about hermeneutics, right? That's how we started. And these are all good illustrations of when we read our Bibles, how do we interpret it? Okay?
I now have the New English translation in my
With the notes?
No notes. So they won't argue with you.
Fair enough. All right. So what I put for the rest of this is, I'm not going to go through, on the back, I gave you this little chart, okay? So you can just see how there is some connection between the different judgments and the gods of Egypt, okay? The little Elohim of Egypt, if you want to say it that way. And what we do know for sure is there, in Numbers 33, right under the God goes to war, they're looking back. While the Egyptians were bearing all their firstborn, whom the Lord had struck down among them, on their gods also the Lord executed judgments. So we're not guessing here. We're not just playing a game. We're looking at these two verses and we're trying to go, wow, the Bible says very clearly twice that Yahweh was going to judge these Elohim, these rebellious Elohim. Now, what I did is I gave you a quote from Hoffmeyer, who was actually my professor for most of my work. He's an Egyptologist, but he wrote a book, and he says this: the centrality of Pharaoh in the plagues cycle is further realized when we consider the Egyptian monarch's responsibility to maintain cosmic order. Ma'at. If I had a minor, it would have been Egyptology, right? Because my professor was an Egyptologist, so I was like, oh, I love this. So, but in Egyptian theology, Ma'at is this everything is at ease. Now, when you look historically, or even historically and geographically, what are I'll just say because we don't have a lot of time. When you look at like the Fertile Crescent, why was the Fertile Crescent so populated?
It's fertile.
You could eat. You had two rivers, right? The Tigris and the Euphrates.
Made
And
life easy, you didn't have to scrape out an existence.
why?
It's in the middle of the desert, you don't have anything to eat.
Yeah, well, what?
You got rain.
No, you have no rain.
It flooded.
Yeah,
It flooded. See, whenever you have rivers like that, it would flood and it would bring in new soil, right? And then you get like fresh new soil every year. It's awesome. And so you had predictability. Well, the Nile was the same. There was no rain in Egypt. Okay? So it's interesting that God takes the Israelites to the land of Israel, and the Jordan is way on the east side. And if you look at the time of Abraham, why did Lot choose the position, remember, that he chose? Remember?
It was fertile.
It was lush.
He said, oh, it's like the Garden of Eden, because at that time, the Jordan River would flood and it would just irrigate everything. It was awesome. Now, down there, I could literally jump across the Jordan River, okay? Because especially like currently, in the current, like September, August, because it is so drained off and everything else that it's just a trickle. But back then, you didn't have that. It would be lush. And so when Abraham said, hey, which land do you want, Lot? He said, oh, I want that land, because it was lush and green. So when you had rivers that flooded, you would have predictability, sustainability. You didn't care about rain. The thing about Israel, it only rains a certain amount there. It's not like Western Oregon, Western Washington, where rain is a curse. Okay? In that idea, rain is awesome. God puts them into a land that doesn't have a Nile River. Okay? Most of Israel, and he says, look, if you obey me, I'll send rain. If you don't, I'll withhold rain. It was, by its very geography and climate, it was a land of faith. Egypt is not that way. Egypt's like the Fertile Crescent, where the Nile River would flood every year. It's predictable. And then when you get to the Delta region up north, just north of Cairo, you'll see that the Nile River splits into 20 different tributaries. And if you look on a satellite map, it's all desert, and what do you see? You see this triangle of green today because of the Nile River. And yeah, it's wonderful. So they never cared about rain. What do we need rain for? Rain's bad. We have the Nile. And so what you had there was part of the Pharaoh's responsibility, because the Pharaoh was considered a god, son of the god, and it was his charge to maintain order. Cosmic order, that's what they called Ma'at. Okay? Ma'at was established by the Creator God. If there was a failure in the land, a state of chaos was said to prevail. So, what you see in the plagues is Moses coming along and disrupting all of this Ma'at, this order, and bringing absolute chaos to every realm of nature. And it was a battle between Yahweh and Moses and Aaron, right? Moses acted like a god to Pharaoh, because Pharaoh was like a god himself in their theology. He had his prophet Aaron. Over here you had the Egyptian pantheon, with Pharaoh being the physical representation of that entire system. So God says, we're going to have a little battle here. I'm going to send Moses. Moses, I'm going to send you, and we're going to disrupt some things. And Yahweh, I'm going to get glory. It's interesting how often Yahweh says, I'm going to get glory over Pharaoh. Because in the Egyptian thinking, Pharaoh is the personification of all their deity and their entire system of pantheon, their pantheon. Okay? So, Exodus 5 there, again, real quick. Moses shows up, let my people go. Pharaoh says, who is Yahweh that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know Yahweh. God says, I'm going to introduce you to Yahweh. Who is Yahweh? Yahweh wasn't part of the pantheon of Egyptian thinking. So then, Exodus 14, I will harden. So this is right as they're getting ready to go. They had already done the Passover in chapter 12. They're getting ready to leave. He says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh. The same thing in 14. I will get glory over Pharaoh And the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. You see how God is like, he's fixated on getting glory over Pharaoh. Because then he also brings, and the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh. And what you see as the plagues continue to go, you have this contest, right? The first one turns water, the Nile, into blood. Well, you guys, you can look on the back. There's no doubt there's Egyptian gods that are connected with the Nile. And so Pharaoh says, "Shh, magicians, you guys serve me. I'm God. Take care of it." And they do the same thing. Pharaoh says, "Who's Yahweh?" Yeah, big deal. I just showed you my power. I actually have power of God because my magicians did something miraculous. Remember, they threw even the rod being thrown down. He said, "Oh, you have a rod that turns into a snake? Oh, real scary, Yahweh. Magicians, come over here." They throw their rod down. It becomes a snake. Now, granted, Moses' snake eats their snake.
Right.
But he says, "So what? I'm not scared of Yahweh. My gods are just as powerful." Again, these aren't parlor tricks. This is the real deal. And he whips it over and he says, "I don't care about Yahweh. Yahweh means nothing to me. I'm not scared of him. Big deal. Well, let's have a battle." And then it goes to the next plague, and the next plague, and finally on the fourth plague, you can see on the back here, and this is a really good chart. Thank you, Bob, for sending this to me. You probably don't remember. It was like
I do remember, yeah.
9 months ago. But you look and it says, the third one, lice, not duplicated by the Egyptians. And they said, "Ooh, this clearly is done by a Yahweh or a God that is greater than what we have." And Pharaoh gets hardened, and he says, "Okay," and you see this back forth. He gets there, he gets subjugated, and then he's willing to say, "Let him go," and then God hardens his heart, and then it goes back and forth all the way to the end. And then finally, I'll just leave this at the bottom there. How do we deal with this language? Okay, Exodus 15:1. I'll actually go down to, this is Moses's and Miriam's song that they sing as they're leaving Egypt after Yahweh had just annihilated all the gods of Egypt and wiped out Pharaoh, who's a god, right? Exodus 15:11 there. "Who is like you, O Yahweh, among the Elohim? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, and doing wonders?" When Moses is writing this, "O Yahweh, who is like you among these spiritual beings?" You know, imagine having you walk into the Cairo Museum and you see all these idols. You have an idol this one, an idol this one, an idol this one. You walk up and you go, "Well, who is like you, Yahweh, among all these stones?" That's not what it's meaning at all. It's talking about who is like you among all these Elohim that can turn water into blood, that can, throw a rod down and it becomes a snake. And he says, "You have demonstrated that no one's like you among the Elohim." That's why when you look at this language in the Old Testament, he is called the Elohim of Elohim. He's the God of gods. He is the Lord of lords, right? Those are all the same thing. And he isn't the Elohim of human judges. Big deal. That is not something that you would brag about. "Oh, you're bigger than a human?" But if you're the Elohim of these other spiritual beings which claim to have real power, it does make sense. And then the last thing, I just threw this in there later, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, he says, "I see, blessed be Yahweh. Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the Elohim, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly to people." And the reputation, think about it this way. We'll go into this next time. What was the reputation? Remember Rahab. What did Rahab tell the 12 spies as they were coming in to the land? Later, they were getting ready.
Well, they're aware of their antics in the desert and how God was with them.
And what else?
That they all feared him.
Yes.
They feared him.
They go, "Our hearts have melted within us because we heard what Yahweh did to Egypt and all the gods of Egypt. And if he did that to the gods," because remember, Egypt is one of the most powerful nations in the history of the world. And if Yahweh did that to them and their gods, oh man, we don't have a chance. Our gods are nothing compared to Egypt. And so it says that their heart melted. And God said, I'm doing this and my reputation is going to precede me. And I'm going to put fear into all of them. And they're going to melt, they're going to crumble before you because Yahweh's coming to war. And that's why in 15:3 it says Yahweh is a man of war. Yahweh is his name. Or person of war, a being of war. You better watch out. And he's not necessarily at war with humanity. He was at war with Pharaoh because Pharaoh had the arrogance to say, I'm a god. God says, okay, you're an Elohim, are you? Well, let's see how good you can do and the people that you worship. Go ahead, James.
This entire hardening of Pharaoh's heart becomes the basis for the theology of the chosen.
For sure.
Because everything, it's the strongest example of God saying, I've chosen you before the beginning of time, and I can harden the hearts of those that I want who are sinners, and it's only going to glorify me. So keep doing what you're doing. So it becomes,
just be you, Pharaoh.
It becomes the hardening of the heart becomes the theology of God not choosing some and choosing others.
This is another great example of the theology of distancing, where God abandons us just to ourselves. God doesn't need to put fresh evil in Pharaoh's heart. That's not what he's doing. God isn't just going, let me create fresh evil. God doesn't do that. God just removes any grace that he had, and Pharaoh, he just says, you be you, Pharaoh. And the wickedness is already there. With God's grace removed, just is like an anchor in water. Boom! It just goes worse and worse.
Common
grace, correct.
I was saying that if the Egyptian, if Satan is ruler of the world, and he's given these powers over to these demons, they really did give benefit to the people that worship them. They had, so for 400 years, they had, let's say, fruit of idol worship.
Don't ever think that there isn't real power in the demonic and the spiritual realm.
Right.
There really is. And
maybe we shouldn't be so judging them if they got blessed by being unfaithful.
We have this idea, and we use it in our language, that somebody sold their soul to the devil, right? And if you look at Hollywood, and you look at some of what many of these actresses and what they're involved with, Epstein, Epstein, you look at them and what they're involved with, it's just deplorable, it's wickedness at it. But look at the success. God said, their God, their Elohim says, I'll give you the world. Give you wealth, give you fame, give you women, give you riches, all that. And you see the deplorable immorality on their part. And, but what does a person gain? What profit if they gain the whole world but lose their soul? And, that's Jesus' question. But they were willing to sell their soul for success. And you see a lot of that within some of these very famous artists. And it's no doubt, is that real? That's real.
There is bloodletting, and there is the selling of the soul for a lot of these perverts on the highest levels of the music industry. And a lot of people like Justin Timberlake and all that, they at one point sold their souls in the sexual way to a lot of these producers and directors of the highest realm of power, and it's their way of saying, I've got you now. It's what happened to John Travolta, it's what happened to Tom Cruise. What they did is they sold themselves, but in Scientology what they did was confessed. And in their confession with these meters, they exposed their sexual darkness, because one of the parts of Scientology is to confess your dark side. And so guess what? They're all blackmailed.
Well, what we recognize, even scripturally, is that there's real power here. Well, wrap it up.
Well, to just share a quick story, back in 1989, I was part of the Rose Bowl parade, and I was on a float that had a ski jump that jumped over this bar, this western type bar, and you go down the ski jump and you do a flip, and it was an awesome experience. But one time when I was up at the very top pedestal, a buddy of mine who coordinated this thing said, just scoot out with your skis and move back and forth a little bit and just play with the crowd. And he says you'll get a real sense of power. And so I go out, and there's 40, 50,000 people in these stands. And you just go out and they just start cheering for you. They want you to jump. And you go back in, you do it again. It was an unbelievable experience of what power You know, I
Power of
remember
the
to
mob
this day,
and the
just
crowd,
the
yeah.
buzz of everybody cheering for you. You know, it was unbelievable. So there is an unbelievable power in having that much fame and stuff. Luckily, it didn't go to my head much.
Well,
But if you don't like
But you get to tell it over and over and over again.
you think about Satan's offer to Jesus. Shows him all the glory of the kingdom of the world. I'll give all this to you. Oh, you just got to bow down. Come on, skip the cross. I'll give all this to you. I mean, and you imagine what was being drawn there. So anyways, well, let's pray. Father in heaven, we come. We thank you for just the background of what we have here to see. Again, we see this unfolding of this background drama that's taking place. Of course, we have the foreground in all that you're doing, you know, in humanity, but we have the background of what you're doing and going to war against these rebellious Elohim. And you will get victory over them, and we see certainly their defeat on the cross. But even as we get towards the prophetic here, that the Elohim, their greatest future, their greatest fame and glory is still coming. And for whatever reason, you're going to allow them to have that, which, you know, we trust your wisdom and all of it, but they're going to get it, and yet you're still going to have victory over them in the end. So we just ask for wisdom as always, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.